The Dallas Cowboys got a gritty road win against the New York Giants in week 4, which is exactly what they needed. We'll break it down on this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can follow him on Twitter at McCoolBCB. Landon, the Cowboys got a nice, gritty road win. And I'm just checking that the sky is not falling yet, which is what I was worried about would happen if you lose this game. We talked about this on Wednesday's show, that they really needed an ugly, close game where they can grind a win out and win it at the end. It's not sexy. This was not a perfect game by any means, but in all honesty, this is exactly what they needed to move forward.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about the fact that, this is a team that just hasn't played in a lot of close games, right? And and when they have, they haven't had a lot of success lately, right? This isn't the same team that, maybe like that, 2019 team or some of those other teams that had played better close games. I think to win a game like this on the road, they didn't score a ton of points. They didn't play exceptional defense really. But they made the plays when they needed to, and they finished at certain points, and that was enough to win the game. And look, I mean, the part of the reason that we would have been upset with this team if they had lost is because we felt like this was a little bit of an inferior opponent, maybe less so than other years, because I do think that they clearly have improved that roster quite a bit since even last year. Yeah. But this was inferior talent, and the Cowboys needed a win big time. And if they were to lose this game, that would have been, obviously really terrible. So the fact that they go out there and get the win, it shouldn't just be overlooked, because it was a tough turnaround for the Cowboys. Yes. And, losing two, it can really snowball on you when you're a young team. I'm really glad that it didn't.
I will never apologize for wins in the NFL. No. Wins are really hard to come by. You know what's even harder to come by is Thursday night football games on the road against a divisional opponent. These Thursday games just in general are really sloppy. So I don't know what anybody
brutal and like the physical with the injuries and everything. It's like, it's really rough, man, on both sides.
And that MetLife field is atrocious. I'm glad that the Cowboys got through that game. I don't know if they got through it. We'll talk about some of the injuries later, but at least you won that game. You don't have to play there again this year. That part of it's nice. As for what this does for them moving forward, one of the things that we always talk about in the offseason, when you look at the schedule, and this is a Bill Belichick thing. His goal, Bill Belichick and Bill Parcells have always said, get through September with a 500 record or better, preferably, and then you'll start to figure out what your football team is. And I think, Landon, with training camp being reduced down, no two-a-days, with the Cowboys didn't play anybody in the preseason. Right? Like nobody played in the preseason. Even guys like Tyler Guyton and Marshon Kneeland were rested in a couple preseason games. The first month of the season is really like the extended NFL preseason. And as long as you're not 1-3 or 0-4, you're putting yourself in a good position to make a run over the next 3 months. And that's what they did here.
And I think also, like, just to kind of look at the progression, I think you've seen a thawing of this over the last 3 games. I mean, it's on the defensive side, it didn't feel like it got a ton better, last week, obviously. But you saw flashes of like for a good example, we'll talk about in the next segment, I'm sure, is Mozzie. I think you saw a little bit of an improved play, at least schematically. At least they kind of early on, they figured out the changes they wanted to make schematically to kind of help shore up some aspects of the run defense. And then you saw some of these younger players starting to play a little bit better. And I think that's what's also going to really help this very young team, is you're going to see these guys like Guyton and Beebe and Overshone and Mozzie and, guys who just not just rookies, but young players that haven't played a ton, get, better as they get more opportunities, get more comfortable and start playing a lot better. And just at the older players, like you said, that haven't played in preseason, now that they're kind of, loosening their legs up in some of these games, you start to see the timing between Dak and CD is a little bit better. You start to see, a little bit better coordination, though. We could talk about the penalties. That part was obviously atrocious, but I think as long as you're starting to see a progression, towards a more organized football, then I think that's a good sign that at least the team is kind of coming into their own finally.
Which we should talk about the penalties, because 11 for 89 in this game, and there's so many other penalties that were either declined or offsetting penalties.
I mean, they were just throwing flags on every play for what felt like the whole middle of that game. I mean, some of it, like, obviously a lot of these were the Cowboys, but there were also to call holding, like, on a wave down punt with 4 seconds left to go in the half.
No.
When what are we doing here? It's like, I don't know. That was my little rant about the refs. But outside of that, I think a lot of it had to do with Guyton struggling at times and getting called for holding, and then even when he wasn't holding, he was getting called for holding. So it was tough. It was again, young guys are going to take their lumps.
Yeah, and that's one of these games. And usually you see a lot of penalties in short weeks with guys not preparing. But some of the penalties were just dumb. Like, for example, Carl Lawson jumping off sides on a 3rd and long, right? Like, you're jumping in the neutral zone.
Mm-hmm.
They got to pick on that play. You probably don't get the pick because Daniel Jones is throwing that pass. But
right.
The Giants ended up picking up the 3rd down. They went down and kicked the field goal on that drive. Like, that's probably a 3-point penalty. Wanye Thomas had a bunch of penalties in this game. Just stuff like that they could easily clean up. You clean up those kind of things, and suddenly we're talking. And that's the other thing, right? The missed tackles. Felt like the only guys that could tackle in this game were DeMarvion Overshown and Jordan Lewis. If it wasn't those two tackling, I don't know what would have happened in this one.
Yeah, and then Mozzie at times too, right?
Mozzie,
but yeah, you're right, because it just felt like
Mozzie's were more like power slams and tackles.
Yeah, God, that one, I really thought that guy was dead. It just felt like, part of it is that they're playing guys like Booth and I forgot the other guy's name who
Ojolari, right?
And just not getting opportunities to play very much, and suddenly now they're on the field a lot, and it's not like a lot of the veterans were tackling better. I mean, I thought Kendricks had a terrible tackling game.
I thought Donovan Wilson had a horrible tackling game.
Donovan Wilson just had a really overall.
The safeties both had bad games. I mean, what was Malik Hooker doing on that final play, or the second to last play, where Wan'Dale Robinson got behind him?
I don't. How are you let somebody get behind you in that situation? Even going for the ball, I understand that you knew where the ball was, but still, like,
that
you missed.
Reminded me of
you missed.
That's like the Raheem Morris play, or Raheem Moore play with the Broncos against the So it's frustrating. There's a lot to clean up, but you'd rather go to a film session probably on Tuesday, trying to clean up mistakes after a win than trying to clean these up after a loss. And I think that's one of the things you like. Like, I think Mike McCarthy and Mike Zimmer can be really hard on their players. Like, hey, this is all the stuff we have to fix and get better at, but it's nice to get a win coming out of this. Where the Cowboys have gotten in trouble in the past, Landon, is they'll win some of these games like last year, 40-0 or 47-17. And then I think you get people that are feeling maybe too good about where you're at. And that's where you see the letdown next week. Yeah. They might have a letdown next week against Pittsburgh because they're maybe not very good, but I don't think it's going to be because they think they're awesome or anything like that.
No, but I think that's the thing, is that, watching this team kind of get better week to week, that's what we needed to see more than anything. Is that I just needed to see this team get better from last week, and I think part of the kind of outlook, and we started this segment's about the kind of 10,000 foot view after a win. To me, I think the elements that I was afraid that they were not going to be able to improve in, things like this run defense, because I wasn't sure if they had the personnel for it. And not that the Giants were some, juggernaut run offense.
Although they ran really well against Cleveland last week, so it's not terrible.
I think what you saw in a guy like Mozzie Smith really, and again, overshown. It just really gives you a little bit of hope in an area that, you thought was going to be, or you were certain was going to be an anchor for this team.
Yeah.
Maybe that there is an area where this team can improve as the season goes on. Maybe there's a little glimmer of hope in that specific spot.
All right, let's talk about the Cowboys defense, specifically the run defense. 24 carries for 26 yards. Why were they so much better this week? We'll break it down next. This episode is brought to you by Robinhood. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.5 APY on uninvested cash, receive unlimited 1% deposit bonuses, and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on an IRA account. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood. Sign up at robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply. For product-specific disclosures, visit robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rate may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps, on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. All you have to do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. You can win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. PrizePicks is the best way to get action on sports in most states, including California, Texas, and Georgia. Download the PrizePick apps today and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That is promo code LOCKEDONNFL on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We are breaking down the Cowboys' 20-15 win over the New York Giants in Week 4. Later, let's talk about the Cowboys' run defense in this one. Yes. After 2 horrendous games, 24 carries for 26 yards, I think it's notable that Devin Singletary, their top running back, 14 carries for 24 yards, 1.7 yards per carry. How did they do it?
I think they just got much improved play up front. I mean, we've already kind of hinted at it, but I think that Mozzie Smith just played an exceptional game for someone that we just considering what the expectations were coming into the game. Look, I actually think, and John Oning and I were talking about this too. This actually started in the 4th quarter of last week's game.
It did.
Something clicked with Mozzie. I don't know what it was, but he just seemed to understand a little bit what was going on. The timing off the snap seemed a lot better. He was just using his power a lot better. And I think that just continued throughout this game. And it just saw him playing on the other side of the line of scrimmage, body slamming Singletary, just finding ways to hold guys up. And I think Joseph, I'm interested to see what the grades are going to be like. And I'm interested to tape on Joseph because I think that he seemed to play a lot better too, maybe more inspired as well for how terrible he played last week. And then you just saw more of Odigizua getting through the line of scrimmage and making an impact. And then that just allowed the linebackers to play more free. And then at a certain point, I think, because the Cowboys were ahead and because they were having more success, I think, throwing the football, the Giants seemed to just move away from that and seemed to kind of try to go to a more short passing game attack, try to feed Robinson. Robinson got a lot of targets in this game just because I thought that they were trying to get him the ball.
Wandale had 11 catches for 71 yards.
Yeah, that's
a
short passing game right there, right?
He had to fight for a lot of it. To be honest, I know the stats don't indicate it. I thought Wandale had a pretty good game outside of a couple drops, mean, he
Yeah.
made a lot of plays to get them in third and manageable.
Yeah, I would like to see what his specific average depth of target is, because I bet it's not a lot, because he
Yeah,
was taking
no.
these passes at like 3 and 5 yards to try to pick up third downs or second downs
He'd
from,
get
like,
4 yards and try to pick up 7, right? And
yeah,
that's hard work in the NFL.
and that's basically, because they couldn't run the football, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, and that's why I thought that you saw a lot of pass attempts without a lot of sacks, specifically, is because they weren't, doing a lot of deep passes. They did throw the ball deep for sure, but they weren't throwing it a lot deep. So it was a lot of quick passes to Robinson, and then Neighbors obviously was getting in the mix as well. And despite, and really what was keeping them in the game with that sort of game plan was that the Cowboys were missing tackles. Is that they would get the Robinson was, like we talked about before the game, is just really good at breaking tackles. So I think that the Cowboys run defense did a good enough job that the Giants basically went away from it and just tried to replicate it with a short passing attack, getting yak after the catch, and it was working for a little while until the Cowboys kind of just buttoned things up a little bit, and that's when I felt like the Giants kind of more struggled to pick up first downs, and then you saw them punting more in the second half.
I did want to talk about Daniel Jones in this game, because I actually thought Daniel Jones played a really good game. 29 to 40. Yeah, I think he was executing the game plan really well, which the game plan to me was, let's try to use the short passing attack to keep our defense off the field and just put together these really long drives. And they did. I mean, they ran 67 plays on offense in this one. And I actually thought Daniel Jones get 29 to 40, a lot of drops in there. Wandale dropped a couple passes. Darius Slayton had a pass hit his hands down the sideline. He was putting the ball on the money. My big concern coming out of this game, and let's just talk about it now. They could not generate a pass rush in this game unless it was Micah Parsons. And Parsons had a tough matchup with Andrew Thomas on the other side, but they were getting nothing at pass rush in this game. Nothing.
Yeah. And I think, Nealand was in and out at different points. It felt like Lawrence obviously was out for, I don't even know, a half maybe. And so
he didn't come back after the injury.
Yeah, and even before that, it didn't feel like they were getting a lot of pass rush. I mean, I think early in the game they weren't getting a ton of attempts, but they had the deep pass down the sideline that I think kind of caught them off guard. And then when they were passing the ball, it did feel like at least they were forcing him out of the pocket, and forcing him to kind of pick sides. So there were times when you felt like, or at least I saw guys, and man, by the way, I love that the prime video, where you can see all 22. It was so great because you can see the kind of thing I just saw, where you saw guys getting open on the backside of the play, but because of the pass rush, forcing him to roll to his right, which I don't know if he's not comfortable rolling to his left and throwing, but he seemed like he was always rolling to his right. It kind of limited his options, and he still was able to make it work at times, but the Cowboys defense kind of, like I said, they buttoned down in the second half, but early on they were, kept keeping him in the game with penalties, and with the fact that they allowed Daniel Jones to just dump it off short, and then have their guys kind of pick up first downs after the catch.
Just a couple updates on injuries. Let's start with DeMarcus Lawrence. He got his middle of his foot taped during the game.
Interesting.
They gave him his helmet. He wasn't ruled out, but he never came back in. He said after the game that he's in pain, but he said he'll be back soon. I don't know what that means. Micah Parsons, he had x-rays. Those were negative, so that's good there. They said he has an MRI scheduled for Friday. Seems like he's in good spirits, but I think the MRI is obviously going to tell the story. But at least as of now, and we're knocking on wood as hard as possible, it seems like he might have avoided a major injury. It's not a break or anything like that. I don't know if I expect him to play next week against Pittsburgh, but anything that's not a season-long injury would be a win for Dallas.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll see how that all plays out. The good news is that he was obviously walking on it, not running, but he was walking on it. So, and the X-rays are negative, so that does rule out a lot of the big stuff. That doesn't rule out all the multi-week stuff, obviously. So, let's hold our applause a little bit just to see exactly what the outcomes are. We should know hopefully a little bit, maybe by the weekend.
One more thing as we end our discussion on the defense.
Yeah,
I mean, they're decimated in the secondary right now. Trayvon Diggs was dealing with some kind. I think he got
cramping. It was really, really humid. That's one thing that was reported by
88% humidity. I saw that.
Yeah, and you could tell everyone was sweating too. So that's I think a lot of guys who were limping off. That's what I had kind of hoped that Micah was doing at first, but then I saw the actual guy roll up on his leg. I was like, oh, maybe not. Yeah. But that's why you saw Micah massaging Trayvon Diggs' leg like that, because I think a lot of guys were getting cramps. So hopefully, that solves some of this stuff.
But at one point in this game, when Trayvon was on the sideline or when he was in the locker room, you were without Trayvon Diggs, Deron Bland, and Kalen Carson, your top three corners, and frankly, your fourth corner, Andrew Booth, because he was on the bench because he was so bad in the first half. They were decimated in the secondary on top of Marquise Bell not playing.
At a certain point, you were also without your top four defensive ends, if you think about it, because you lost Sam Williams. You didn't have Lawrence. Obviously, Parsons was out, and Nealon was kind of in and out at certain points too. So, look, that's why I thought it was impressive. Look, the game-saving interception, was this guy that they called up from the practice squad. So,
but you need him. You're going to need, and this is one of the things that Mike McCarthy talks about every year. It's not just the 53 guys. We're going to need 70 players on this team to help us get through the season and win games. And I think tonight is a perfect example of that. Lynn, let's talk about the Cowboys offense, because yet again, it feels like they are 1, 2, maybe 3 plays away from putting together a really good performance. Mm-hmm. They just can't quite get there. We'll discuss the offense next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, like maybe you thought the Cowboys were going to actually win this game, you can go check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. There's so many fun things that you can bet on live during these games, like the updated point spread, the money line, the total. You can bet on whether or not you think a drive is going to end on a touchdown. And sometimes you can even bet on what the exact play is going to be. It's so much fun. Go visit FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen every single day. For your second listen, go listen to the new Locked On NFL show with 2 shows every single day. First, the madman Tyler Rowland kicks you off in the morning with a double shot of NFL espresso. Then stop by the barbershop with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. Find Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Later, let's talk about the Cowboys offense in this one. 20 points. They did have a missed field goal by Brendan Aubrey. Al Michaels jinxed him. That's all Al Michaels' fault.
Thanks, Al.
Passing game was pretty good. 22 of 27, 220 yards. Dak averaged 8.2 yards per attempt, 2 touchdowns. They actually ran the ball relatively well. Now, they didn't put up big yardage, but Rico Dowdle, 4.2 yards per carry. Ezekiel Elliott, 3.8, including a lot of short yardage stuff at the end. Hunter Lipke converted a key 4th down. There you go. But it just seemed like, man, they couldn't get out of their own way. They were so close to blowing this game open, and they could never quite do it.
Well, it was the penalties, right? They just kept on getting called for holding calls. Some of them were, I don't know, especially the run ones, I felt like. So, but I do think they did kind of figure out something with a little bit of the mixture of the running backs, right? It did feel like this was a good blend of the usage of the running backs, right? And I'd like the situation that they were playing these guys, I felt like was appropriate, right? It was just mostly the Rico show. And then when he got tired, you got Zeke in there. And then at situations at the end of the game, maybe near the goal line, it felt like you saw more of Zeke, and I thought that was good usage, right? Like
Zeke actually had a really nice run. It was the drive the Cowboys got way backed up. It was first down and had an awesome cut, would have gained 10 yards, and then they had a holding. It's just
but it was not even like on the front side of the play either, too.
no.
So
They called 2 holdings on that play, by
Yeah.
the way.
Yeah, which okay. I thought that it wasn't, you're right, that the numbers weren't like exceptional. Like the yardage totals weren't like, I don't have it in front of me, but
They had 80 rushing yards, including a couple kneel downs. But I mean, overall,
how many attempts was it on? I don't. That's
so
what I was trying to look up.
So I'm just trying to like do the quick math. If you just do the running backs, it's like 18 carries for 75 yards ish, something like that.
Yeah. So I mean, like I just feel like, I think the total was like 23 for 80. So it kind of, that includes a 5-yard, or a couple losses with Dak, and that weren't exactly run. So yeah, I mean, I think that they at the very least, it felt like maybe they figured something out with kind of, the how they're rotating these guys, how they're deploying them, and maybe that's going to change obviously week to week. But I just think that, this is now the 3rd week in a row that Rico has started as the running back, and it just felt like the running game has gotten better as the weeks have gone on, and that he's gotten better, and that it's clear to me that he's the most talented back. We've said this every week, but it's also seemingly clear to them that this seems like it's getting better as far as their usage of him is getting better.
Yeah, there's still a couple plays here and there. You're like, ooh, why? Let me give you an example. They have a 3rd and 12 and they're backed up a little bit, and you run a slant flat combo, and Dak immediately throws it to Hunter Lipke, and it's out of the reach for Hunter Lipke. And Dak is missing that throw. He's just been missing that throw all year. But even if Lipke catches it, you're not getting 12 yards out of that play.
Well, it started before that on 2nd down and 12 or whatever it was. Whatever they gave the ball to CeeDee Lamb, like, what was it? This was like the 2nd time they just handed it was
1st and 19, and they gave a sweep to CeeDee Lamb, and he lost a yard. So then it was 2nd and 20, and then they ran a delayed draw with Zeke, and I think he got like 8 yards or so. And which is fine. I have no problem with that. You get out of your own end zone a little bit. So now it's a 3rd and
you do that
manageable.
to be aggressive, right? Like that's the point. Is you do that so you can set up a 3rd down where you attack the sticks, go beyond the sticks, not just like throw a half-designed screen to your fullback in the flat when you haven't made that throw to your flat in your left all season long. For goodness sakes.
Yeah, and there's even ones like on, I think it's the 2nd last drive of the game, like you're moving guys off the ball. Like the run game is finally working, and they run a jet sweep to CeeDee Lamb that loses them 3 yards. Like,
yeah,
and it just seems like everything is a little disconjointed. And then I want to mention this one. Brandon Cooks. I think I'm starting to get worried about Brandon Cooks a little bit, right? It doesn't seem like teams are respecting his speed at all, and they're sitting on some of these underneath routes. And he's just getting bullied at the top of the routes, and he's not drawing pass interference calls, whatever. But if that's going to be his role in the offense, I'm wondering if Tolbert should be more of the focal point as the number 2 receiver.
Well, if they're not, listen, first of all, the big problem to me is that he's not getting the defensive pass interference calls. Like it feels like for the last all 3 weeks that he's run that comeback route, he's been getting separation coming back. First of all, if the timing route's thrown correctly, but the problem is that it's usually late, which is not so terrible, but he's getting contacted at the catch point before the catch arrives. And I don't think he's being respected by the refs because of his size. I think they're just assuming that he's not holding up, but the guys are arriving way too early. So yes, I think you're right. If that is going to be the way that the NFL refs are going to call that situation, if they're just not going to give him those calls, then we need to find other way. Either those need to turn into double moves now. Maybe that's what they're doing. Maybe they're trying to set up, a lot of tape of him running stop routes so that, next week they run a double move against Pittsburgh or something. But otherwise they need to start, getting him more of these over routes that he loves to run, that he's so good at, or just kind of flipping the targetage between him and Tolbert, who I thought, besides the 2 kind of dumb penalties, I thought Tolbert had a pretty decent game too.
I also wanted to talk about CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb had 95 yards and a touchdown in the first half. It was unbelievable. Okay. I think he had 11 yards in the second half of this game. I don't know what it is about this offense where he can be so good for a half and then just disappears. It's happened last week against Baltimore. Like he was really good early in that game, and the second half, nothing. What's causing the Cowboys to be so wildly inconsistent with CeeDee Lamb?
Well, I think it's the problem is that they're not. It feels like teams are adjusting in the second half, and the Cowboys aren't adjusting to those adjustments. It's like CD really burned us the first half. Let's bracket him or whatever they do to kind of solve the equation. And then the Cowboys don't like do something to counter their counter, and
Yep.
it's like that's what the kind of next step is. And look, I mean, certainly McCarthy has not been known for kind of creative play calling at this point for a while, but like it do feel like he's smart enough and has enough in his bag over the years that he should be able to, recognize what's being done to him
Yep.
and then counter it better than he has. And I think that's been the big issue at this point.
The Cowboys get a win, a much needed win to improve to 2-2 to save their season. I'm going to keep saying that. They're going to save their season because I really think if they would have lost this game, things would have been rough for the Cowboys. 2-2, you can live with that. A chance to go over 500 next week in Pittsburgh, Sunday Night Football. Can't wait. And it should be a lot of fun. But we've got some really good content coming up for you next week. We got a special guest coming up later. Right. Should we say who it is?
Or go ahead.
We have Aisha Morrison is going to jump on the show. Is it Wednesday that she's coming on? No,
that's right. She'll be on Wednesday. So
okay.
we're going to fold her into our mailbag questions. So make sure you guys get your questions in when we ask for them later on the week.
We're going to do all 22 review. We're going to talk about the big stories. Hopefully on Monday, we're not talking about more injuries. But enjoy this Cowboys win. Enjoy your weekend. Enjoy the rest of week 4. And we will see you right back here on Monday.